There is associated sometimes to the homelessness issue. And so that's one unit. And then also in September, we started the burglary prevention unit, which is a recreation of a unit we used to have. And that is bigger. It includes a lieutenant, a sergeant, and 8 officers. And they focus primarily on the investigation and apprehension of individuals associated with burglaries. So burglaries are up. They're really up. I mean, like 200% probably if you compare it from 2 years ago. Part of that is because, although we do have a gang problem in San Jose, it's not as prevalent as other areas, but nowadays, whether it's gang members jumping in other gang members, or just straight out crooks, they're soliciting these juveniles to commit these crimes. And the reason they do that is because we don't even, 9 times out of 10, juvenile hall, if we arrest a juvenile for burglary, they take him to juvenile hall, they call him or her mother, and they come and pick him up and right back out. And that's because the sentences for juveniles is less. But huge increase in that. So that was one of the focuses with this burglary prevention unit. And that's another thing that's associated with burglaries is truancy. So we still have a truancy abatement unit, very small, but this unit is also going to focus on that. And what that entails is officers driving around in marked cars and contacting juveniles that look to be at school age and not at school during school hours. So then we take them, custody them, we take them to a truancy center, or we take it back to school depending on the attitude and the history of the juvenile. But this burglary prevention unit, again, is big, and it's gonna focus primarily on those parts of the city that had the highest burglary rates, which is not your neighborhood association, which you should be very happy about that. I did a meeting with District 9 last week, and I pulled the stats for that district, that council district, for 90 days, and there was, I think, 100 vehicle burglaries.
But that was the whole district?
That was a whole district, yes. 100 vehicle burglaries, 60 residential, 70 commercial, a couple of decent exposures. I haven't pulled those stats here. Fortunately for you, you don't have anyone running around at the moment that wants to see decent, expose himself. But so burglary prevention also works with the crime prevention unit, financial crimes unit, to work on burglary crews, because they are often a crews where they just bring people in and they all just kind of focus out those things that you've been seeing at Apple stores and Lululemon and Verizon. They're going in as crews, taking everything and just going. So they focus on that, and they also focus, our burglary prevention unit focuses on pawn shops, because a lot of the times that's where these crooks bring their merchandise to get fenced. Last week, just to give you a stat, 2 weeks ago, with the burglary prevention unit, they arrested one suspect. And when they went and got a search warrant for his house, they found evidence of over 65 residential burglaries. Wow. So I'm not saying he alone was responsible for all 65, but maybe he was part of a crew, but that's one person that is associated with 65 residential burglaries. And at the time, when I got the stat last week, they were still trying to follow up with the victims, which is often hard. You try to find the property and try and locate the victims. So those are the 2 units. And then the other thing I thought would be a fun fact is the massage parlors. Oh, yeah. So if you see, whether it's a nail salon, massage parlor, if it's all blacked out and you can't see inside that massage parlor, 95% of the time it is an illegal massage parlor, which is so in the last, and we just restaffed our vice intel unit with a couple extra officers. So last year, they identified 191 massage parlors in the city that didn't have massage permits. These are parlors with no permits, so it leads you to believe what they're really doing, right? They don't even take the time to get the massage permit. So they closed over 120 of those. There's 33 still in the process of being closed, and there's 45 that left so far that are left remaining open. So about 45 of all the ones identified appear to be legitimate at the moment. 90% of all of Intel's investigation, Vice Intel's investigation revealed prostitution. So 90% of all their investigations revealed prostitution. Just a fun fact about massage parlors.
Are there any, I heard there were a few in our area, but did you?
Probably is, but I did not pull that stat. But I'm sure there are, I'm sure.
It's probably 3 or 4 in strip mall.
It's usually in the strip mall, and again, you'll see it, the blacked out windows, 80 people going in and out, I hope none of you visit. Go ahead.
So where do you think all those customers are gonna go now?
Which one? So maybe you do partake.
He's writing it down.
Well, I'm sure, yeah.
I mean, there's still the, I guess.
The draw, the
draw
need,
for that, so
the business.
something,
There is, so we also have, which our street crimes unit will focus on the street level prostitution. Back in my younger, more youthful years, it was so much fun to do those prostitution decoys as an undercover officer. It was so fun, it was great. So they still do those, but we do have those prostitutes that still work and still provide that. And generally like Market, First in Monterey, First and Market downtown San Jose, and pretty much on First Street north of 880. That is all those motels are.
What about Blossom Hill and Snell? Does people say there's some around there, but I question that.
I can't say that's on my radar. The next time I drive through there, I certainly know.
I don't ever.
It's generally associated with a less expensive motel with an outdoor entrance. Generally does not involve
There's not anything.
hotels, but anything with an indoor entrance where they got into an interior hallway. But so look around, if there's a motel nearby. I mean, some girls do car dates too. But to answer your question, the Mustang Ranch, is that in Reno? I think it's legal there, so
yeah.
we can all go to Nevada.
I'm just gonna touch this.
So yeah, anyway, so that's all I brought. You guys have any questions or concerns?
Is it just the same, are there different phone numbers for different, you mentioned all these different units, so if we have a concern, should we just be calling 311 or the main
Well,
line?
we have a pretty extensive email on our home webpage. You can click on those units. So we'll use traffic, for example. If you click on our homepage, you can go down to traffic and submit a traffic enforcement request about your issues. So they do have links to some of these other, but how, like, burglary prevention unit, they have the stats. They're able to pull it up and see, okay, this neighborhood had, you know, this many in this amount of time, or it's consolidated here, or it's focused around this time. So they're able to actually pull stats. Now, street crimes, narcotics, prostitution, that type of stuff would be more on you survey, you call. But there's nothing wrong with calling. Now, if you call, and we're stacked like we have been today, we have been so busy today, it'll wait. And maybe by the time we get there, yeah, they might not be there. Because we do prioritize and we triage, so even though it might be next call to get dispatched, and, you know, kind of like the ER, right? You've been sitting there for 3 hours and 5 people come in and you're like, I was here first. Same kind of thing with the calls. But like today, we had a major incident deep in Almaden, very nice neighborhood in Almaden, drug house, domestic violence, and ultimately he hunkered down in the house. We had a full MERS call out, which is where our SWAT team comes. And by the time they actually got in the house and found him hiding in the crawl space, he was suffering from medical distress. So he was transported, but he died. So that's, it's awful, but it's a bit date, but it looks negatively on us, even though he really wasn't in custody yet. It still counts as an in-custody death, so that'll be on the news for the next week or two, but it's been a very busy day. But call, because if you don't call, we're not gonna come. I mean, so even if you might not get the response you want, just call.
And we do have a CIT in that, right?
Well, we have, here's the thing, so way back when, we have a CIT unit.
What's CIT?
Oh, crisis intervention team.
For mental people with mental health issues.
So that unit is right under the deputy chief's, out of the deputy chief's office. It includes a sergeant, an officer, and one civilian. So they're responsible for training the entire department. Way back when, say, 10 years ago, to take that 40-hour crisis intervention training class was voluntary. I took it. Now it's mandatory. So for the last 3 academies that we've graduated, 3 or 4 academies, I think 2 years ago, everybody in that graduating class has had that 40-hour class. And the chief has passed one of his 21st century policing goals was to have every officer trained with that. We're almost there. But here's the thing, so when the call, and a lot of our calls do involve mentally disturbed people. Dispatcher puts that out, and now they always ask, is someone CIT? And now where you might have one person respond, now everyone is, for the most part, CIT. But it's not required, but we are probably at a 99% success rate to send a CIT trained person to every mentally ill.
That's good.
So, and it is important, you know, I mean, it is. I mean, you don't realize it till you go through the training and you see, and then you look at people in your own community and, that makes sense now. You know, maybe next time I'll be a little nicer to him or her, or I won't be so snappy, or maybe I won't talk so loud. You know, I mean, it teaches us a lot. So, and since we are dealing with those types of people a lot of the time, it's very important. Anything else? Good.
Have there been any incidents around the campuses of the schools? Strangers on campus or strangers in cars?
Well, there was, I probably wouldn't say it, well, I guess it was near the school. So there was a, 314 is the penal code for indecent exposure. And there was a gentleman who lived in X-Ray, which is in Southern, so it's under me, who exposed himself. One was a young adult, but he clearly targets children. The other was a middle school girl, where he called them over, asked for directions, and then exposed himself. And then the other one was a couple high school field hockey players coming home from, I want to say it was deep in Adam, like Leland, right? And did the same thing. It was the same person for all of them, and they just caught him last week. So there are, but our reporting requirements for school instances is high. So anything that involves a school, it is a notification, whether the officer notifies the sergeant, and it goes to that. At a minimum, every school incident gets reported to a sergeant. Then based on the incident, a lieutenant. Then based on the incident, a captain. Then goes all the way up to the chief of police. So, the reporting is important. So, but there are incidences, most recently you have, I like social media for some things, but I really don't like it because you have these kids with these Instagrams and Snapchat and, whatever. And they Snapchat somebody who said, I want to shoot up the school, and then that gets forwarded and panic. And I live in the city of Gore. We just had that the other day where it all gave, everyone was passing this around that someone's going to shoot up the school after lunch. And I had no idea that was occurring. I actually was bringing my children lunch to let, Togo's or whatever. And I couldn't understand why all these parents were outside the gates, but they were all picking up their kids because this had gotten out. Which my philosophy is, it's terrorism, and I won't cower to terrorism. And if there was a truly credible threat at the school would advise. And if every time there was those little threats, you'd be living in your house all the time. But we do take those seriously, and we can backtrack now with the with the IP addresses and emails and different things. Most of the time we can at least get to the source. And 9 times out of 10, not that you should ever treat all threats are credible, right? You got to treat them seriously. 9 times out of 10, it was, I was just joking.
Right.
Which, it comes with some hefty criminal charges, but.
Right.
Does fencing in a school perimeter help?
I think so.
You think so?
Mm-hmm.
Even though it's a chain link fence, people can kind of climb over and stuff like that?
I think it's help. I think every fence is a deterrent. Some are more deterrents than others. I think that all schools should have fencing. I think they should have wrought iron, but obviously, budgetary reasons, it's not always practical. I think all schools should have a check-in even bringing my kids lunch. I have to check it in. I have to, they don't just let you. But I do think every fence is a deterrent. Now, if we could put 18 feet fences with barbed wire, and of course, on the flip side, you want your kids to be able to get out too, right?
And you don't want them to feel like they're in prison.
No. All right, anyone else?
Well, thank you for your.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you to save me.
Oh, I was trying to look, you know what I found? I have grandkids. Okay, that's it.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, so next we're gonna move on to Terry Brokah of California Solutions, and you brought a.
I brought a friend, I brought some support.
Okay, I'll let you
Yeah,
introduce
okay,
her, and they're gonna talk about recycling process, neighborhood inspector roles, and the China sword, which I can't wait to find out.
Yeah, it's all good. Thank you very much. Vivian is my counterpart tonight. So my name is Terry Brokah. I'm with California Waste Solutions. I hope you don't mind if I lean on your podium a little bit. I have been with California Waste Solutions for about 5 years or so. I spent time with Republic Services, Allied Waste, BFI before then. So I've been in the solid waste industry for a few years now. And again, been in San Jose for about 5 years. Just celebrated my 5 years on Monday. So Vivian is I'm the operations manager for San Jose.
Where did you come?
I came from Fremont, Allied Waste, and I came from Pacheco and Pleasant Hill with BFI. Yeah, so spent some time there. It was all garbage, and I've done all lines of business, so commercial, residential, whatnot. So Vivian has been with California Waste now for about a year and a half or so. She is our lead for our eco team, you will see out in the streets, looking through your carts, putting out tags. I'm sure you're putting out tags. She is part of that team. So just to give you a quick overview, if you're not familiar with California Waste Solutions and where we came from and how it started. So we are owned by the DeWong family, who came here from Vietnam, and they left in the middle of the night during the war. So they fled on a boat to California, San Francisco. Our company started with a family collecting cardboard in the streets, selling that cardboard to buy trucks and to buy warehouses and to buy. So they started from very, very little and worked their way up to California Waste Solutions. So in 1992, California Waste Solutions came into Oakland. They got the Oakland contract, started servicing recycling in Oakland. In 2002, we started in San Jose. So, and we've been here ever since, and currently still a provider of the residential for districts A and C. We don't do B, that's B team and another company does that. So we service about 175,000 homes a week. We take in approximately 78,000 tons of residential recycling material a year. Most of that is brought in, is still hand sorted. When it comes through the line, so everything that's in your cart, somebody's gonna touch it when it comes through. And we do 35 to 40 tons per hour processing. That stuff's processed, separated out, put into bales, and then it is sold. And wherever we can sell that commodity, depending on what it is. Whether it's a hard mixed plastic, which we get the hard plastics, whether it's paper, newspapers, textiles, things like that. That's what we do. We sell that worldwide, which will tie right into the neighborhood inspectors that are in there. Really kind of ties in with the China sword, China ban, what that is. So China has been the largest importer of recycled material for the world. They take over 50% of the recycled material from the world. What has happened here recently, as of January, China has put restrictions on the contamination levels that's allowed, that they will accept. And that it is 0.5% contamination, which is very, very little. In San Jose alone, we average 35% contamination from everyone. That's in general. We've had numerous studies done. So you can see how we have to have our eco teams, what we call them, out there just going through the cars, trying to educate. And it's really meant to be an education process, because we want everybody to recycle. We want your material. That's what we want. We don't want it in the landfill. But we have to be very, very stringent on what we're taking out, because we just can't get rid of it. Nobody's buying it. You can't sell it. There's no market for half this stuff anymore. So, and when you do, it's a third or a half of what you used to be able to pay for it. So it's very tough for recycling companies to make it through that way, to fill with the China ban. So other than that, I didn't have a whole lot of number, kind of stuck on time, so I'm here to take some questions and help answer anything and clear up anything that I can for you. Yes.
Thank you. How does that 35% determined when you said 35%?
We did, so we have outside contractors that do waste characterization studies with the city of San Jose. And we find a company that we can all agree on, and they do the study. And so what we do is we'll flag a truck, bring it in, and then just pull everything out of there. And just sort it and separate it out and figure out what's recyclable and what's not. So, and then we know too, based on what we have to take to the landfill. Unfortunately, we do have to take to the landfill because 65% of it's only the only thing we're able to recycle. So 35% of that, it's a lot.
35% goes to the.
35% of material is contaminated that goes to landfill.
So contaminated means it's styrofoam or it's something.
Styrofoam is garbage. Contaminated would be
Or it's dirty.
food,
Food waste.
oil,
Waste,
grease, diapers.
Well, you don't recycle.
Toilet paper?
Oh,
People do.
Well, they, yeah, that's.
We can just tell you, you would be amazed at the stuff that is in the carts, that people put in their carts. Diapers would definitely be probably low on the list compared to something that's fine. It's amazing, it really is.
So they put it into the recyclable bin instead of the garbage bin?
That's correct.
I'm sorry, say it one more time?
The stuff that you get, the contaminated stuff that you get is found in the recyclable bin, even though these same people have a garbage bin also?
Yes.
Yep.
They think it's recyclable.
Yeah.
Diapers.
I will say this.
It is recyclable.
I'll give you my opinion of it. In San Jose, most residents, you pay for your garbage cart.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So the recycling cart comes with it. So everybody's paying for a 32-gallon garbage cart, which very small,
Small.
and a 96-gallon recycling cart.
Oh.
And so what happens most of the time, and not everywhere, but in some areas, there's multiple people in one house. I live with several people in my house. You run out of room. That's what they do. And that's what happens, and then it ends up in the garbage. You know, and I don't think everybody does that, but a lot of people do that. I think there are many people out here trying to do the right thing.
I think
Yeah.
you're right.
Yeah. So, and that's what we're here to do. We're here to help try to educate, and you know, I don't have all the answers. I don't know everything about recycling. Vivian probably knows more than I do. She's in it every day. But the main one of our main issues is grease from the pizza.
Yeah.
That gets in the cardboard. That cardboard's no good anymore.
But even though like a little spot?
Even just a little spot.
You know,
It's really true.
Milroy, they put their
Mhm.
pizza containers in their,
They probably put it
yard
in
waste.
yard waste. Yeah.
Their yard waste.
Oh, it can go to the
Yep.
So does that
we
what you do it?
But we.
We don't do the yard waste. We don't do the composting. All we do is residential recycling.
Okay, so that's.
And you're right. You're right. A lot of cities.
Yeah, because we, you know, when our kids come, our grandkids, or if they come from, when they come from Gilroy, it's kind of like, well, no, just, you know, it goes in. No, it doesn't. It goes in the garbage.
Okay, so I think Smita and then Barbara and
I was just gonna say, so we put it in our compost bin, and we're lucky enough to have enough space to have a bin, you know, away from the home. But I think maybe this is something our association should pick up, is why the heck does San Jose not have kitchen waste compost?
There should be. You should have a
Yeah,
composting program. There really should be a citywide composting program.
So many other littler and poorer cities do it, and it would make life so much easier. You can throw fish and bones and stuff that you can't put in a backyard compost into that,
Yep.
pizza, cardboard, all that stuff could go there.
and then
Oh.
Sorry.
So do we know, wait.
Do we know what towns around do have composting? I know, I gather.
Well,
Yeah,
several
San
ones,
Francisco.
San Francisco.